Hi, folks. Welcome to the Sunday edition of the iWrite Radio videocast stroke podcast. Today, I've got a sneaky feeling Jean Freeman and Gordon Brewer are going to get a mention, which will lead us into testing. The Labour Party have made a statement about their totally clear, absolutely 100% definitely understandable policy on independence. And that will lead us, I'm quite sure, into the latest Scott Goes Pop independence poll. So, well, we'll kick off with Brewer. Were we impressed with Gordon this week?
Well, as I say, before we started recording, for a change, he didn't talk over her. He was speaking to Jean Freeman.
He did talk over her.
He did push and push and push about the testing, and to be honest, I kind of want to know about the testing as well. You know, how do you explain after all this time that they still can't cope with the testing?
That's a pretty poor way to put it. They can cope with the testing. I wouldn't say anybody's saying that Scotland's not coping. I would say people might think that Scotland aren't doing enough, but then we have questions as to why they're not doing enough, but they're certainly coping.
They've got the capacity.
Well, it depends on your definition. Well, yes, in theory, they've got the capacity. According to two people, I think one was Brewer and there was somebody else yesterday, I think, summed it up, that the 15,000 a day testing capacity should be enough. It would include testing everybody in the NHS and everybody in the care homes once a week or something.
I didn't get this. I genuinely didn't get this call for asymptomatic testing of people in care homes that haven't had any outbreaks. I think that's madness. Test the staff, aye, because the staff are the ones that are liable to take it in, but the residents who are in care homes who haven't contracted COVID are not at risk of contracting COVID other than by contact with the staff. So you didn't need to go in there and test them.
Yeah, I think those figures
isolated.
Yeah, but I think those figures that I've heard that talking about the 15,000 capacity is just including staff in care homes, not the residents.
All right, let's do what the journalists don't do. Let's try and think this through. They go into care homes, they test all the staff every week. They find asymptomatic members of staff that have to isolate. Anybody that's been in contact with them also has to isolate. So what do you need for that scenario? You need enough staff, which is the Scottish Government's position, that they've got a bank of staff that can go in and replace them.
Yeah, but it would appear that the private care homes don't want to pay the going rate for that bank of staff. Well,
let's think about the steps here. So let's presume they have got enough staff standing by. Now, it might be the case that private care homes don't want to pay for them, or it might be the case that private care homes are not encouraging staff to get tested. Who knows? Look, so that's at the very front line in the private sector. They have a responsibility there. Jean Freeman does not control private care homes. The question the journalists aren't asking is, why aren't all the staff in private care homes being mandated by their management to get tested?
Yeah, I suspect that either in Scotland or England, you cannot force an invasive test on anybody in the UK. Think of if you get stopped for drunk driving. You've got to agree to a blood test or even a urine test. And you can refuse. Obviously, you get a bad outcome when you get to court. I don't think they can force you to have an invasive test in this country.
Well, my problem with Brewer this morning was that he didn't ask the right question. The right question to ask is, why, if you've got all this capacity, are people not coming forward? It's not, why aren't you going around tying people up and forcing them to take tests?
Well,
why aren't you making it mandatory?
Well,
for
that's
instance?
that's my question. But let me throw in an interesting little piece of fact. My son is in Melbourne, lives in Melbourne in Australia. He got a job. He got furloughed on his proper job, and then he took a job at Bunnings. Bunnings is the company that tried to buy B&Q. So it's the B&Q of Australia. He went in to work and had a cough and a bit of a cough and a runny nose. So they sent him for a test. Well, they sent him home. They sent him for a test and sent him home. And he got the result of the test within 36 hours and was back at work because it was clear. Now, I don't think that's happening in this country. And if they can do that in a shop, can't they do that in a care home in this country?
Who gave him the test?
I couldn't tell you.
And remember that Australian healthcare is private.
But presumably the company must have paid for the test.
Exactly. So the front line is, are people coming forward for tests, being encouraged to, with the question mark, should they be mandated? The next level is the NHS laboratories, which means the various Lothian Health Board, etc. Are they in a position to do the testing? Now, Gordon Brewer et al. Are not asking those questions. They're blaming the government for everything.
Well, look, only 2 or 3 days ago, there was another piece of news. There was another 50,000 tests had gone to America because they didn't have the capacity in this country, and they'd come back and they were faulty.
Mm.
They'd come back, sorry, they were rejected in America.
Oh, right, they were rejected in America.
They either were the wrong test or not up to standard. It was actually the Americans that binned them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still going abroad. They're not. The capacity doesn't exist in this country. I'm talking about the UK.
I would bet you money that the capacity is there in Scotland. They've been really careful about this sort of thing. If they say they can do 15,000 a day, they'll be able to do it.
Yeah, but that does include the lab in Glasgow University, which is actually part of the UK testing capacity.
Yeah, but it won't include the lab in Glasgow University sending anything out with that lab in Glasgow University. I mean, they'll only be sending tests to the States or anything like that. Glasgow University lab will be doing the tests themselves, or the Scottish Government wouldn't be using them.
So my whole point about this is, the easy question to ask when you've got Jean Freeman in front of you is, it's your fault, what are you going to do about it? The difficult question, and that is where I disagree with you, because he did talk over her when she was giving full answers. When she attempted to say, well, look, I'm not in charge of private care homes. I mean, my answer to that one would have been, I'm not in charge of private care homes. Would you like us to nationalize them, Gordon, so I can be in charge of them?
All right, well, Norrie, but on a scale of 1 to 10, we're just talking about Gordon Brewer and interrupting. He wasn't on the top end of the scale today. He was well down on usual.
Where he's normally a 10, he was only a 5 today.
Aye, but he was still useless. I mean, he every week he tries to conflate 2 or 3 things together and contort it all around to get to a point where he might trip somebody up. Doesn't matter if it's Jean Freeman or somebody else. That's what he's trying to do. But today, he actually asked, and I wrote it down so I didn't forget it. He asked about people going into hospital without COVID and spreading it. I mean, what kind of fool can come up with the idea that people don't have COVID-19, but they go into hospital and then spread it? What is he talking about at that point? He's not talking about asymptomatic. He's just getting overexcited because, as I've said in the past, Gordon's got skin in the game. Gordon's got somebody he's worried about or something because he's getting overexcited, and like Norrie says, he's not asking the right questions. Frankly, I think BBC should be considering giving his job to somebody who can do it.
I think you're right about skin in the game, but it was less obvious today. I've noticed that in previous interviews he's done, and you get the feeling that he knows somebody personal, or maybe he's lost somebody in his family that's died or something.
I just wish they would ask questions that enlightened us. Well, instead of asking questions for a gotcha, in conjunction with the paper press to give them a headline.
I think we need to look as well. I think we need to look closer at Scotland's health boards. I don't think they've performed brilliantly in this scenario. And I don't think they were performing brilliantly pre-COVID. We had all kinds of problems with Tayside Health Board, basically being incapable of delivering what they're meant to deliver. Lothian, we've lost a chief executive who commissioned the hospital and didn't stay on top of the contract and is having absolutely running away and has no idea as to whether or not they want to actually be responsible for the job they were being bloody well paid for. And I think there's a problem at local health board level.
And you've also got the situation in Glasgow, as if Glasgow itself wasn't big enough. They had problems with the Clyde Health Board. So they combined the two. Greater Glasgow and Clyde became one health board, which covers half of Scotland.
It does. I mean, Greater Glasgow Health Board was massive back in the bloody 80s and 90s, never mind actually enlarging the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because making things bigger always works.
In North and South Lanarkshire, as I say, at health board level, and let's be honest, a lot of people that run health boards, they're placemen. They've been working in quangos for years and years. I do wonder that it may be, after all this is over, it may be time to take a hell of a close, hard look at how we structure our health service and see if there's a better way to do it. And I didn't want a top-down reorganisation a la Tory. I'd like to take the good, the best administrators, the ones that are actually doing the job, and then roll out their best practice in other places.
Well, as you guys know, my wife works in the health service, and they do some things very differently. They have this best practice thing, where effectively the people that are getting the results are then used to train people elsewhere who need help. They also have the no blame thing. Something goes wrong, nobody gets hung out to dry on it, and that's helped a lot. And it's been recognized internationally that it's a good system for solving the problems. That's not what's going to happen here. Talking about those kind of politics, we've talked about Serco and Diageo and everything doing the testing for the Tory government. There's a reason for that, and it's Gordon Brewer. If you don't have responsibility for the people who are delivering the testing, you can walk away and say, it's not my fault, it's their fault. You know, a hospital fails in Liverpool because, was it Carillion goes to the wall? No, my fault. No, my fault. It was Carillion's fault. Which is the other big difference, I think, through this pandemic between the Scottish government and the UK government. UK government's tried to keep it at arm's length so they can be blame free.
It is a matter of degree, mind you. I mean, the Scottish government under the SNP have done what they can.
It's noticeable that, for example, we now have Test and Protect, which is effectively test, track, trace, isolate and support. We now have that up and running when we said we'd have it up and running. It may just be in its infancy, but it's up and running. Boris's world-leading test and trace thing, we're now told won't be up and running until September.
I'd love to
June become September quite so quickly.
I'd love to find somebody that was involved in the setting up of this so that we could actually get information about how simple. Some people seem to think this is a very simple thing to do. How simple it all was, or how complicated it all was. What steps were taken, what were the objectives.
It seems that
it would be interesting to speak to somebody that actually had hands-on experience of how it worked.
Remember when Newsnight covered it, Norrie, and there was a bunch of doctors somewhere in Yorkshire that had actually set up a test and trace thing themselves.
Yeah.
And it seems that we've gone down that route. We've gone down the local route of using local expertise. England have gone down the route of bringing in Serco, a pan-national company, to run it for them. And at the moment, as I say, now that they've got Dido Harding, who managed to run Talk into the ground and was on the board at Cheltenham when they held the festival, it seems that her job really is to come out and take the flak for their test and trace system not working and not been up and running in any meaningful way until 3 months after Boris promised it would be leading the world. It's a strange one that they're getting away with that. They're getting an awfully light ride of the press for that one, aren't they?
They are, and they don't get interrupted. Sorry.
Maybe we could send Gordon Brewer a ticket to London, see if he can get a job doing there.
I noticed Martin Geisler, the newsreader from BBC Scotland, was doing the BBC this morning, and the early morning news. But I think that's from Manchester, isn't it?
He's down in England now. He presumably moved to Salford, aye.
Well, I think the people, all kinds of odd people turn up on a Sunday morning in BBC. I think they're, well, let's not go down that road, but they obviously, their regular work contracts don't make them work weekends or bank holidays or anything.
Aye, well, it's a shame that Matt Hancock turned up on all the Sunday programmes this morning making an absolute pig's ear of himself again.
Well, he got well shafted by the guy on Mar that said we should have locked down earlier. The expert, the SAGE member.
He was twisting in the wind on that one. Oh, there's more than 100 people on SAGE and a lot of different opinions. Aye, but his one's the one that seems to have been accurate, mate.
Well, I mean, I've got a real problem with the attacks, and it'll be on both governments, the Scottish government and the UK government, with the use of hindsight. Hindsight's 20/20, guys.
It is, mate, but
the information we have now and the information we had at lockdown, two different things.
Absolutely, but we clearly listened to some scientists and not others. That lassie for Edinburgh University, Devi Sridhar, mate, she was tweeting very early on that we should be locking down way before we locked down.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. I think what I'm really trying to say is Nicola Sturgeon's oft-repeated line of "the buck stops with me. I'm responsible. I make the decisions." The Scottish government makes these decisions on the advice we get, but we take responsibility. Is not a line you will ever hear coming out of Matt Hancock's mouth.
No, absolutely not, mate. They're deliberately setting scientists against advisors, against civil servants, so that the blame gets splattered all over the planet and none of it sticks to them. It's the old adage for these politicians, mate. You shit the bed, you clean it.
I did actually hear Boris Johnson say that when he was asked at term Prime Minister's questions by Keir Starmer, whether he was in charge of basically the crisis, and there is an argument that he had an earpiece in. Did you hear all about that story?
Yeah, it's just a shadow in his ear.
And I was looking at the TV this morning because they repeated it on the Parliament channel this morning, and his ear does look very odd. It's a huge ear.
It's inbreeding.
Everything's odd about Boris.
It's inbreeding. Right, guys. Right. Let's move on to really important stuff.
Right.
The Labour Party have announced a new policy on the Constitution. Jimmy, as an ex-Labour Party member, I thought you might like the opportunity to explain it.
I'm not sure I can explain it, mate. They're basically anti-indie-ref, but they are, and obviously anti-independence, but they're pro-devolution, pro-home rule, and what was it, Stuart? Is it advancement through democracy, which is a strange one.
It's just a programme of home rule, devolution, and democratic advance.
Yeah, so basically, they clearly at this meeting came down to a three-way argument as to what was going to go in the press release and just chucked it all in. But having stood against independence for Scotland, clearly that's their position and they're sticking to it. But the way the polls are, Labour are now going to duke it out with the Tories to try and get the biggest percentage of less than half of the votes in Scotland. Their ambition is to finish second, not third, in next year's election. They've declared that and put it on paper.
I've got a question for you. Are we having 3 referendums one on, what did you call it? Democratic?
Advancement through democracy, apparently.
Sorry, so we're going to have a referendum on advancement through democracy, home rule, and more devolution. So,
yeah, it would appear that this is Labour's attempt to muddy the waters that much that when we get to a referendum, we're going to have about 8 things on the bloody referendum paper, and only devolution, Indy's only going to be one of them.
Right. Well, okay. Well, perhaps I've been a bit unfair. What it actually says: program of home rule, devolution, democratic advance within the UK. Does that enlighten?
Well, I just want to know when we're going to get to vote on this, or is this just going to be introduced by a Labour Party if they ever get into power again, without asking the people if they want it?
But I mean, of course, the suicide, it's been described as another suicide note. The suicidal policy is to be against another referendum. A so-called socialist party which is against a democratic referendum. I don't know where they go and defend that.
Well, they don't have to
defend it
because they're unionists.
In the union states, the union caps everything, mate. The union's more important than anything.
I'm going to be
self-determination for people that are in such a liberal and democratic union is not required. That's a Labour position. Self-determination doesn't matter. You've got enough self-determination by being part of this wonderful union.
What it's going to interest me is the Labour Party, which, as we all know, has never had a tendency to fracture or factionalisation. 35% of them, according to the latest poll of Labour Party supporters, support Indy. So that leaves 65% to divide themselves between the 3 other options that they've got on the table.
Home rule, devolution, or democratic advance.
So they get 21% for each of them and 35% for Indy.
By the way, they're going to get a lot of bodies out in the field for any campaign for next year's election, aren't they? People will be that confused, they'll just sit on their ass. They'll have to bust them up for England again like they did last time.
Well, they don't come to my door anymore, but I wish they did, because I would love to ask that question. Are you an independent supporter, a home ruler, a more devolutionary, or this democracy thing you're on about?
Democratic advance, whatever that is.
Democratic advance being what?
Who knows?
They're going to do away with all, not just referendums, a democratic advance by doing away with democracy.
Yeah, democratic advance.
Norrie, I think the best thing about their whole press release and the whole wee campaign that their wee chums like Hutchin and what have you launched with on Saturday was the picture at the top of the press release. It was brilliant. Richard Leonard and Jackie Bailey standing there. I'm sorry, mate. All I could see was Eric Sykes and Hattie Jakes.
I did like the point. I did like the point you made earlier, Jimmy, about the policy being for each of the leading lights.
Aye.
What was it?
Aye, it seems to me that Richard Leonard supported one of them policies, Jackie Bailey another one, and Ian Murray another one, and they just couldn't decide, so they just chucked all 3 into the press release rather than have duke it out around the table.
It's getting really complicated with the fences they're sitting on. There must be about 20 odd different fences they're spread across.
I'll tell you, they'll be doing themselves all kinds of internal problems clenching that tight to hang onto the fence.
They are. I mean, it's sad, but they are a serious joke.
Once the world has started to laugh at you, you might as well just shut the door and go home.
It's astonishing, Stuart. I mean, seriously, this Scottish Labour Party is actually going to be that shit at this election coming up that Jackson Carlow is still going to manage to hang on to second place with the Tories, and Jackson Carlow is laughable. It's incredible. You sometimes wonder if the Unionist parties actually genuinely want control of Scotland, or if they just want to muddy the waters enough so that people wouldn't go for Indy. Because that seems to be all they're aiming for now.
I think we're at the point now where the way Jackson Carlow tells porkies, he could join the Labour Party and still stand as a Conservative Party and MSP.
Maybe that's the next big thing, mate. They'll
And
get pumped in next year's election and just they two, they'll all join together in a grand unionist coalition. Put Ian Murray up front in that nice Union Jack suit of his.
Well, Ian Murray and Richard Lennon could both quite happily wear blue rosettes as far as I can see. And that other guy, Dan, that other Labour MP that is suggesting that you should get out of the welfare system what you put in. Does he not understand how it works?
I thought that was called national insurance.
Aye, but I mean, he literally, he's talking about if you put in a fiver, you get a fiver back. So if you can't afford to put anything in, you get an out.
Oh, I see. Is he in the Labour Party?
Labour Party MP.
The Labour Party MP south of the border, mate. It's quite frightening. I mean, there's Tories out there that wouldn't put that down on a leaflet, and he's going out there and talking up like that. It's incredible.
Well, I think we'll finish off today with some good news. Scott Goes Pop ran a panel-based poll, I think it was.
Yep.
Last week, just after the Cummings debacle. And it came back with a 52% support for independence, which means there's a 48% support not for independence, I suppose. But there was some interesting stuff when you dug down into it. I mentioned one stat that came out of it. 35% of Labour voters now support independence, according to the poll. Any little nuggets that you guys noticed?
Apparently, I mean, apparently, speaking generally, there's just a lot of underlying strength for any independence poll because of the confidence that all parts of Scottish society have got in the current government in Scotland.
Aye, there's a huge confidence. There's also a lot less dithering, a lot less don't knows. You know, people are more strong in their beliefs. I personally think 52% is not a great number given where we are at the moment. But
what were the don't knows? About 6%.
That's for me. Aye, it was only about 6%, mate. And the don't knows in the past have been
18%,
considerably more than that. Aye, so I think attitudes are hardening somewhat. Certainly on the yes side. I think there's a lot of no voters. There's a lot of soft no's that we could be getting into, and Nicola Sturgeon's probably doing that by her wonderful administrative skills at the moment. But as I say, I think I look at that and then I look at polls in England and the Labour Party are getting excited because they've closed the gap to 3 or 5%. And I'm like, the fact that you're still behind the Tories, regardless of how poorly they have operated since December, and you're excited about that just shows how little ambition Labour have.
I mean, they can do nothing to save England for 4 years.
Exactly, and they're getting all Leeds United about it.
And we've got Brexit coming up. And by the time, a wee prediction for you, by the time the next general election, UK general election comes around, there'll be gerrymandering of the constituencies.
Oh, absolutely. That's marching down the path now, mate.
You won't be able to take government decisions through the law courts. You will no longer be a member of the Human Rights Court. So everything will be pushing the Tories back into power. And the Labour Party will not be able to do a damn thing about it.
And if the Tories look like they may lose the next election, even after they've gerrymandered it and fiddled the courts and that, they'll get rid of Boris.
And the media. The only media in the UK that would be against the current neoliberal position would be the Morning Star.
I think the Guardian and the Mirror will step up to the plate on that.
Oh, I don't agree at all. Guardian's still been run by people that work for the GCHQ.
Well, they've done some good in-depth stuff recently about this trade agreement with America and what's actually going to happen with a no-deal Brexit. I'm fairly confident 2 of the newspapers in this country will make a reasonable fist of holding the government to account. I think in Scotland, of course, it'll just be very confusing.
I think in 4 years' time, the Deadwood press might be dead, a lot of it anyway. I mean, I think what we're seeing over the weekend with the protests and that is that new media has far more influence, particularly on the young. But new media has far more influence than anything that either television or print have to offer. I mean, the whole worldwide protest that's going on, that wouldn't have happened if people hadn't been able to watch that video on their own phone, sitting on the bus, sitting in their car, sitting in their house. They're watching a lynching without rope. That's why people are so annoyed, because that's what that was.
Well, I do think that The Guardian is probably one of the most likely to survive just because of the way they pay for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I think you're right, mate, and you're right.
I donate
again
to The Guardian, and I don't always agree with them, but
the front page again this morning, the Observer stuff was superb. Kudos to the Daily Mail. They had a brilliant picture on the front page, but the story around it was absolute horseshit.
well, anything else you guys spotted today?
Well, I don't think we've discussed a simple statistic from the other day. In England alone, there were more deaths from COVID-19 than in the entire EU combined.
There's a headline. There was a headline on Twitter today that said there were more deaths in in the UK, than every country in the world, discounting the USA.
Well, that's only because Brazil have stopped reporting figures altogether, mate. Let's be honest.
I've no idea if it's true, but it might have been actually was everywhere but the Americas.
But bear in mind that this is the record that our part-time Prime Minister has said he's very proud of it.
Aye, I mean, it's astonishing that he only turns up to work on a Wednesday and Thursday these days. He turns up to do PMQs, and kudos to him. He turned up on the Thursday as well to do the evening briefing. But other than that, life's a long weekend for Boris. He's having a great time. Getting to play tennis at Buckingham Palace. He's playing tennis all around these lovely posh spots in London, and presumably bouncing around on his new young thing at the same time. Because he's bound to have a new one by now. Now that Carrie's had a bairn, he's bound to have a bit of spare kicking about it.
Does anybody actually know how many children he's got?
No. We're not even sure he knows. I don't think it makes any difference. You know this thing where you do, on the 23rd of March, you said. I don't think it makes any difference what Westminster politicians say, because no pressure is put on them by the press. I mean, Matt Hancock could stand up today and say, actually, I was kidding. Herd immunity is exactly what we've been aiming for all along. And then stand up tomorrow and say he didn't say it.
Yeah.
And there would be no headlines.
Well, there is pressure
would just shrug their shoulders.
There is pressure put on them by the TV press, mate, but they just choose not to appear on the ones that put pressure on them. BBC Newsnight, Channel 4 News, even, frighteningly, Good Morning Britain. Should they be questioned and pressurised and held to something that they've said previously, they ain't going to appear.
Have they started speaking to the Today programme yet, the Radio 4 Today?
I believe they do now speak to Radio 4, yes.
Yeah, but really, does it matter? We now know from the Dominic Cummings affair that it's the same as Donald Trump said. You know, Donald Trump said, look, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and still get away with it.
That's kind of my point. The only reason Donald Trump can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it is because Fox News would come up with a story to justify it.
Well, they'd come up with it. We know just how bad this government is doing, and yet I don't believe outside Scotland that they're getting the bad press that we see.
An American ex-president has just come out and said he's not voting for Trump.
Oh, that's devastating.
Bubba has just come out.
Who?
George
W.
Bush, yeah, has said he won't be voting for Trump.
I'll be honest with you, mate. I had a look at the polls, and Trump's a lot closer than I thought he would be on the national polling.
Jimmy, if he keeps going the way he's going to get the racist vote, and there's a lot of racists in America.
Have you seen the way it's going in America? Have you seen the right wing are out on the streets with their guns, protecting the businesses to stop the Black Lives Matter protesters getting any near them. Imagine walking down the Royal Mile with your saltire, when all your pals and your family and all that on a march, and all the shops and cafes and all down the Royal Mile had vigilantes with guns standing outside.
Second Amendment, mate. You're entitled to carry your gun if you've got your wee bit of paper. It's
well, come on.
And I'm
the reality
quite sure
is,
there's going to be a major shooting.
At least Donald, there probably will be at some point, mate. But at least Donald's will finally go to his war. It's a war in his fucking house. It's not the one that he wanted, but he's got a war now.
Aye, they got it up overnight. Well done then.
And what about that lovely sign, Black Lives Matter, all the way down, this painted on the street by the mayor of Washington?
Aye, that's outstanding. That looks outstanding from the air. I'm sure Donald must be, I mean, let's be honest, if you're flying Air Force One, if you're flying the helicopter taking him back to the White House, you would go any route other than where he could see that, because he's just going to lose his chip when he sees that for the air. Well,
the worst video clip I've seen so far is a guy in the wheelchair getting shot.
Cool.
Yeah, that's pretty grim.
Unbelievable. They're shouting at him to lift his hands, put his hands up. He's in a wheelchair. Now, I don't know if he couldn't lift his hands up or whatever, but he didn't. He was moving his hands about right enough, but he might not have been able to get them that high. Bang, bang. And they didn't shoot him once. Didn't shoot him once. They shot him about
seen some horrendous stuff, man. It's just ludicrous. Fortunately, the law enforcement community in most areas has calmed it down. It's been them that have calmed it. It hasn't been the president. It hasn't really come for the top. A lot of states, the police themselves, or maybe it has come for the top, but they're not going in there with a full Robocop armour anymore, because they realise that just antagonises and causes problems.
Somebody on one of the podcasts, American podcasts I listened to, made a good point. They'd spent time in Britain, and they were saying the difference between the British police and the American police is the American police are there to enforce the law.
Right.
That's how they see themselves. Their job is to make you obey the law. And they are the law. So if you're not obeying them, you're breaking the law.
They all see themselves as Judge Dredd. I am the law.
But the equipment they've got. When somebody else was saying they buy army surplus.
Aye. They buy army surplus for the Pentagon. Shed loads of it every year. I mean, it's cracking kit, mate. It's just a shame that the Pentagon didn't stockpile bloody face masks and ventilators, eh?
Good point. Good point. Stuart, anything?
Not at the moment. I think I've covered just about everything today.
Call it a day at that. Thanks, Stuart, for coming on. Thanks, Jimmy Hutton, for coming on. Norrie Stewart. And we'll be back tomorrow with another barrel load of laughs. Cheers for now, folks. Thanks for listening.